Good morning, Shahan. Yes, I am joined by Pascale Lamche, and I hope I'm pronouncing your surname properly. So a number of questions coming out in the media briefing. It was one of those media briefings where the 1 minute it was Sydney Mufamadi responding to what is said about him in your film, and then the next minute it turned out that actually you were in the room as well and you had your own questions to pose to Sydney Mufamadi. So I suppose let me start by asking about, are you surprised about his feeling of grievance? That he was not heard out, whereas things were said about him in the film that have led to people drawing conclusions about his role in perhaps treating Winnie Madikizela-Mandela unfairly.
No, I'm not surprised that he's upset. But what the press briefing confirmed was that he did meet Henk Heslinger, that Henk Heslinger was a central part of this very large cross-frontier investigation into the allegations against Winnie Mandela, that it was a huge operation, that it had a large budget, that he of course knew of this, even if he wasn't following the day-to-day running of the investigation, and that this investigation took place before the TRC. So nothing that's in my documentary was contradicted by the former minister today, and I think those were the essential conclusions of the press briefing today.
But here's one thing that did not come out from his briefing today. Him confirming that he's the person who summoned Henk Heslinger and George Fivers to his office as Minister of Safety and Security and instructed them to start an investigation. His line of argument is to say, I was aware of it because I was the minister and I would have been briefed about it, but it happened at the behest of Tony Leon.
Well, no. He may have.
That's his version.
Well, okay. Well, what I understood from the various elements that one has to pull together, because it was over an hour long, and there was a lot of discussion about very general issues. But when we got to the specific issues, which was what is in the film and what may have aggrieved him in the film, I think it's clear that they may have been responding to concerns that Tony Leon were bringing forward, but it's clear that he knew Henk Heslinger and he met with Henk Heslinger and he was aware that this, and he was the minister in charge of all of this. I mean, the George Fivers wouldn't have been able to inaugurate this enormous investigation without the minister's knowledge and without him having the say-so. In fact, I don't think he contradicted the fact that he would have had to initiate this investigation.
I do suspect that we are going around in circles in a way, because what I'm saying is the former minister says he was briefed about the investigation, but he says it's ludicrous to suggest that he's the one who would have instructed that this investigation be carried out.
Ludicrous?
He says, if you heard that in the way that he operated, the commissioner, if anyone would have come to the commissioner asking for a crime to be investigated, an investigation to be opened, and that investigation is not open, he would have.
This was a major cross-border investigation into the wife of Nelson Mandela in 1995. This was a critical point. So this wasn't just some little murder investigation. This was huge. So I think one can draw on one's own conclusions about whether the minister would have known that such an enormous investigation was taking place across borders and of such an expensive investigation. He also acknowledged that he must have known, that he did know, that Jerry Richardson was paid a sum of money whilst he was in jail. So he acknowledged, I think, everything that I put to him.
So let me ask you then, on a balance of probability, whose version do you believe? Former Minister Mufamadi's version that says, I was briefed about it because it was significant enough. It was an investigation instigated by Tony Leon, and the commissioner took it up, or the version that is in your documentary from Henk Heslinger that says, actually, the minister was the genesis of this investigation. Whose version do you believe?
Well, I think one can just look at it from a position of just credibility and probability. And, it is probable that the minister would have known that such a major investigation took place. And that's the point here. This dichotomy that's being attempted to be set up between, well, do we believe, a significant, an ANC minister, or do we believe a Soweto, a detective from the Soweto murder squad? That's not the dichotomy. What we have to look at and you have to decide is whether it is likely that such an immense investigation into Winnie Mandela could have been launched without the minister launching it. And I think it's unlikely that it could have been launched by Commissioner George Fivers without it having been at the behest of the minister.
I hear you. So why did you not seek him out at the time, the minister, the former minister, that is? Because I'll tell you why I'm asking, because in the way that the narrative goes and the way that in the editing he's then, shown as this person that was behind these attempts to resuscitate an investigation into Winnie Mandela. One would have thought, journalistically, to be fair, you would have had to seek him out.
Yes, I agree. But if I'd sought him out, he would have said what he said today, which corroborates the entire thing. And I do agree. I should have had the money. Unfortunately, I made this film with no funds, with very little funds, having to struggle bit by bit to raise money from all kinds of little European stations, starting in Strasbourg, going to, the Swedes, the Danes, the Norwegians, etc. So this film took 3 years to put the money together. And in fact, even just to afford for me to come over to South Africa was unaffordable half of the time.
I must say, with respect, I don't see what money has to do with it, because you actually did interview people who were in South Africa. He was in South Africa alive.
I apologized to him in this briefing. I apologized that I did not call him to ask him to be in the film. That is true.
All right, just a final one that I want to run by you. The whole issue around relying on people that, according to the former minister, are questionable. People such as Henk Hesslinger, who were part of the apartheid security police apparatus, as opposed to relying on Winnie Madikizela-Mandela's comrades to tell you the story of Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. What do you say to that?
Well, it's an uncomfortable story that I am presenting, and the uncomfortable story is that Winnie Madikizela-Mandela was investigated by her own party, if you like, after the transition of power. And so within that framework, the entire documentary is uncomfortable about everything that was done in order to control and manage Winnie Mandela. So the fact that I was able to find people, the director of Stratcom, to talk for the first time, that I was able to persuade Niels Barnard to talk to me for the first time, that I was able to find Henk Hesslinger. This is important information that I offer South Africa, for your history. It's important that this is opened up, and much though I would love us all to believe that there'd been a miracle transformation and that nothing terrible had happened between 1984 and 1994 and 1997, it simply isn't the case. And I think to try and suppress history from coming out is counterproductive, and I do feel that there's a long time has elapsed. I mean, if we must never ever talk about what happened in the past, that's not in anybody's benefit, and certainly it doesn't benefit South Africa as a whole. And because Winnie Mandela has been so demonized and victimized, and in the world at large she is considered to be a murderer, etc., etc. And you see it in the obituaries, you see how this is constantly repeated. I felt it was very important to make a film that actually looked at it and told another story from another perspective, and that's what I've offered to you. And I leave it to all of you journalists to dig deep and ask the questions and not be cowed when press conferences are organised that say other things. Keep digging, and I'm not the final say on this. I made a 84-minute film, and I offer it to you. go out and do your work, you know.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Pascale Lamche. I really appreciate your time. Of course, Pascale Lamche is the producer and director of the documentary Winnie, which has really formed the basis of much of the conversation that has been taking place in the wake of the passing on of Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, answering a few questions, of course, about how the documentary came to be produced and also how names, including, of course, the name of Sydney Mufamadi, came to be mentioned in that particular production, leading to the debate that we are seeing today, Shahan.